Have you ever had a client ask what kind of returns to expect with incremental Google ad spend? You can say it depends. You can spend the next 4 hours doing regression analysis, or you can open up your budget simulator and answer the question that they're actually asking. I'm Amy Hebden with Paid Search Magic, and in this tutorial, I'll show you how to build a free budget simulator in Data Studio that helps clients understand the relationship between spend and expected performance. If you want to follow along and build this yourself, you can grab the Data Studio template and Google Sheet and setup instructions by joining my free Data Studio practice lab, and you can find that link in the description. Now, let's walk through how the simulator works, what you need to set it up, and how to customize it for your own clients. Let's look at the driving question behind the budget simulator. Your client says, we want to add $30,000 to the budget this month. What kind of returns should we expect? Now, there are a lot of factors that influence that answer. Are we uncapping search campaigns that are limited by budget? In that case, returns could be strong. Are we launching new top-of-funnel campaigns? In that case, blended ROAS will probably drop while we build awareness. New offers, different order values, different budget allocation, everything contributes to driving a different outcome. And you can spend a lot of time trying to account for every variable. But here's the catch. The more precise you try to make the forecast, the less useful it actually becomes. Because as soon as you give someone a highly specific estimate, they tend to evaluate whether you predicted the future exactly right. But that's usually the wrong question. The better questions are we directionally in the right range? What's our break-even number? Are we comfortable with the downside risk? And most importantly, is this approach defensible? So instead of trying to predict the future with false precision, we use the simulator to explore scenarios and set reasonable expectations. Here's how that looks in practice. So last month we spent 50K, and this month the client is thinking of increasing it to 80K. Now the question becomes, what happens to efficiency? Because scaling usually comes with some performance loss. You're entering new auctions, expanding targeting, and reaching less qualified users. So instead of assuming the same 70K, let's model a more conservative 60K. And that's still a strong return. What happens if it drops to 50? That's still profitable. Now what happens if it drops to 40? Now at 40, we're in the red. And if that feels like a realistic possibility, then this investment probably doesn't make sense. And that right there is the value of the simulator. We're not pretending that we know exactly what will happen. We're pressure testing the decision before the money gets spent. So use the scenario controls, adjust the budget, change the expected ROAS to something conservative, and explore the range of possible outcomes. Now let's look under the hood at what you actually need for this to work. There are three main components. First, you need a data source. The simulator needs to start with real performance data, and your stakeholder will want to see some real data to compare your estimates to. In the template, we use last month's revenue, cost, net revenue, and return on ad spend as our baseline so that we can see what actually happened before we start modeling what could happen next. Now, if you want to add more metrics up here that would be important to your stakeholders, there's room to do that too. Second, you need the scenario control parameters. These are the controls that let you change the assumptions inside the dashboard. For this simulator, we'll use one parameter for budget and one for ROAS. Now, each parameter gets a minimum value, a maximum value, and a default value. Now, third, you need calculated fields. These are the formulas that make the projections update automatically when the assumptions change. Now that's really all this is. Real performance data, adjustable assumptions, and calculated fields that drive projections. Finally, let's look at how to make it work. Right now, the data source is populated by a Google Sheet. Now that was the easiest way to set this up with sample data, and it's going to be one of the fastest ways to make updates. You just open the sheet and plug in last month's revenue and cost data in the green boxes, and you're already halfway done. ROAS is calculated automatically, and again, you can add any other metrics you'd like to include in the budget simulator. From there, the second step is updating the parameters so they make sense for your account. In the setup panel, the metrics directly from the data source are in green, the calculated fields are in blue, and the parameters are purple. Click on the function next to the parameter name and adjust the values so they make sense for your account. For budget, since you're using a slider input, if last month's spend was 50K, you might want to use a max of 100K, but you wouldn't want 10 million. Now, I usually set the defaults to the account's actual spend last month, since that gives us a realistic starting point and it zeroes out the formulas in the calculated fields. Then we'll just do the same thing for ROAS. Set a realistic minimum and maximum range, and again, use the account's current or last month's ROAS as the default value. Now that's all you have to do, and the simulator updates automatically as the assumptions change. Now, if you want to take this a step further and connect it directly to your Google Ads data source, you absolutely can. You just need to reconnect the scorecards and recreate the calculated fields inside your own data source. I recommend making a copy of this report page as you build them out. The underlying logic stays the same. We're just swapping the sample sheet for live account data. Now, as you can see, I use some conditional formatting to change the colors of the net revenue change in dollar amount and the scenario verdict in percentages, and you can customize that however you like. I personally like to give clients direct access to the dashboard so that they can play around with estimates and take more ownership of expected ranges. And there you have it, a budget simulator that lets you explore scenarios rather than predicting future performance. The free budget simulator template is inside the Data Studio Practice Lab, and the link is in the description. If this gave you some ideas or saved you some time, please like and follow for more. And as always, leave your questions and feedback and requests in the comments.